Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lab to Right Leadership, a space where we talk about career skills, purpose, and leadership for the next generation. I'm Gitika, your host and author of the book, I Don't Know My Career Yet, and That's Okay, a book rooted in helping young people navigate uncertainty and find their own path with confidence. In today's episode, we are exploring the theme Redefining Success Lessons from Real Lives. I'm really excited to be joined by Mike from Simpang, a platform centered around clarity, strategy, growth, and impact, supporting people and organizations to navigate complexity and shape meaningful success. Mike, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for the invitation.
And let's start with your journey. So could you briefly share your personal journey and what inspired you to found Simpang?
Yeah, absolutely. So Simpang was founded through the desire to create a platform to help schools all around the world and actually to create high functioning teams. So like many people, I've had lots of different career pathways open up, and I've been very fortunate to work with some amazing people over time. And what I found is it's about collating and collecting those experiences over time and putting them together. And when I started to put that together, I found that I do have something that is powerful and ready to actually share. So the desire to create something new, the desire to create Simpang came from taking my experiences that I've had in both international and UK education systems and seeing how that would then translate around the world. And I'm very keen to take then also examples from outside of education. I think sometimes education, like with many industries, can perhaps be quite insular in its outlook and in its thinking. So what I'm really keen on doing is looking for examples of practice and examples of thinking that don't necessarily come from obvious places, that come from outside of education in wider life.
That's really interesting, Mike, especially how you led to Simpang. So thank you for sharing this. So building on that, success has traditionally been measured by titles, income, or status. So what's, in your view, how should we define success in today's world?
Yeah, I think there's probably one word that's the most important word for me, and that's impact. I think the words that you use to describe success, the biggest missing piece there is impact, and impact can be measured in lots of different ways. But the way in which I like to look at that concept is the positive impact that you can have on other people and enriching their lives. So I would measure success personally by the positive impact and interactions that take place, whether that means providing a different perspective, whether that means direct support, or whether that means providing a platform for somebody else to grow around me. That's where I've focused my efforts and energy over time. So I think in terms of defining success, I think if you've been able to have significant positive impact on something or somebody else, that's how I would measure success.
That's really, really interesting, because that really challenges how we traditionally think about success. Because for many people earlier, it was all just about title. But nowadays, I think what you shared is all about creating an impact.
Looking at the success of an individual is probably built on the back of the success of many other people around. And sometimes it's your turn, and sometimes it's your turn to be in service and support. So I think measuring success in that way and looking at the positive impact on others allows that two-way relationship to occur. I think that we're in danger, I suppose, in the way that the world is, and we're looking at increased levels of automation, is forgetting that more deep human connection that people have and the impact that people can have on people. And I think that's really important, and that should be considered when measuring success. How have people around you been able to grow and develop themselves?
And I think that connects well to the people you work with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's two ways of measuring success, I suppose, and you can go into any project thinking, well, I'm the expert, I've got the answers, so I will do this and provide you with the answers. Or you can go in with a more pragmatic approach with the emphasis on upskilling and sustainability. I think being able to support and create success that is sustainable is far more impactful. I think the mistake that people often make is they measure the more instant success, but don't consider the legacy or the sustainability of what they've achieved. I think it's kind of okay that the initial success is measured or pushed by an individual, but at times the only true way to measure that success is, does it live on beyond that individual's initial input? So if you're going to directly have an effect on culture or success, it's okay. But if it needs you to be there and needs you personally driving it, my challenge back would be, is that a true measure of success? Because if you walk away and the whole thing disintegrates, one argument could be that it's not reached that higher plane of sustainability.
Thank you, and that's a really powerful perspective. So thank you, Mike, for sharing this. Through your work with Simpang, you really interacted with people from many different backgrounds, nationally and internationally. So could you share examples of individuals whose journey challenged traditional ideas of success?
Yeah, I think from an international perspective, working in international schools all around the world, one of the unique things that occurs is that families tend to move as a family, as you would expect. So if a family leaves a particular country and goes to another country, they'll be going as a whole family. So very often what that means is that perhaps one of the members of family has been a teacher, and that's the only career that they've been involved in. But very often within that same family, both family members will be working now as teachers, but it's quite often the case that one of the family members at least has had an alternative career before and has perhaps come into teaching a bit later. So it's quite fascinating actually to hear what else people have done. It brings a whole new perspective when you've had a whole career before education. It's more and more the case because routes into teaching and routes into different professions have opened up over time. And I think people's thinking about a single linear career has kind of evolved into acknowledging the skills and experience and expertise that have been created in one career and allowing that to then transition into another field. And I think the more and more cross-pollination that we do in that way, the more collective efficacy we have.
This also links to how careers are evolved today. So earlier it used to be like everyone seen as a traditional route or in a linear way, but how now everything is interconnected. So, and the careers are evolving, and all these transferable skills are so useful in exploring the world around us. So thank you for sharing that. Is there any other any other example you would like to share of anyone's journey who really challenged you?
Yeah, I think the mistake people fall into as well is thinking that they've got to know everything. So you build up that set of experiences over time. So it's much more powerful to have a variety of experiences over time, because that collection of experiences is unique to that individual, and that perspective is built on that combination, which is unique. So I think it's important not to get hung up on that linear path, because most people have no idea what they're doing. They've got no idea where they're going, and they've got no idea where they're going to end up eventually. So to try and plan for something that isn't a tangible single destination is impossible. And I think some of the biggest inspirations that I've worked with, the people that have had the greatest impact, have had no idea where they're going along the way. And that's what makes them so powerful in terms of inspiring others, that they're not actually trying to reach an endpoint that's predefined. It's less important where that endpoint is. And I kind of go on the mantra of asking, or just acknowledging, is it better than it was yesterday? Yes, it is. Is it as good as it's going to be tomorrow? Absolutely not. And then in the middle of that, and that's perfectly okay. It doesn't have to be fully mapped out. And it's compounding as well. So it's not the gains that people see within their careers, and people that I've worked with who are inspirational have not had a linear pathway that is obvious year on year. they've perhaps invested 5 or 10 years of their earlier career in a certain way, and then used the entirety of that experience to accelerate themselves into another field, such as education.
Definitely. And I think that's the power of I don't know yet. And you just enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. And this leads to my next question. So many successful people seem follow non-linear career paths. So what do you think embracing unexpected opportunities is becoming increasingly important today?
Yeah, I think that we have to. I don't, because I think if you tried to map out the entire career of an individual, the timescales are too long, and the rate of change is happening quicker and quicker, and also accelerating. So if you tried to make a plan that was a decade long, it would be impossible to plan far ahead, because you're planning for a world of increasing uncertainty. And that's not in a negative way. I fully celebrate the differences that happen along the way. But if you think back just a few years, the things that are now taken for granted and the way that we work, we couldn't have dreamed that they were going to be part of our working day or working life. And yet we've still managed to fill our lives with busy careers. But we're just doing different things, and technology has a part to play in that. Different experiences that build over time. What was possible in the past now is seemingly easy, or easier to achieve. And so I think, in terms of not trying to map out too far, because you don't know what you don't yet know, and if you hung up on an answer that may exist, I think that's a waste of effort and energy.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe that this also leads to the purpose. Like, it's all about serving the purpose rather than just everything map out today for the next 10 years. So
Yeah.
do you believe the purpose and impact are becoming more meaningful markers of success than traditional achievements? And if you think so, then why?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the more traditional achievements are perhaps becoming less valuable in a world where there is more automation, and particularly with more artificial intelligence, in that it's less about the time it takes to create something, and more about the value of the thing itself. And I think redefining what success looks like is going to keep changing. I've got one example from the marketing world. It's a story that's been told and retold many times, and it's to do with the redesign of a company logo. So it was in the merger of Citibank and another bank. I'm not quite sure on the details, but it's a story that's been told many times. So the person in the story is a lady called Paula Scher, and she was commissioned to redesign the logo at great expense to the companies. And the Citibank logo is simply the word city with an umbrella over the top. And she designed that. The thing is, they were in the meeting and they were talking about the redesign of the new logo. And the story goes, and it's maybe been embellished over time, but it's a nice story. The story goes that within the meeting itself, she actually scribbled that logo on a napkin, and before the meeting had even finished, she presented the first draft of the logo. And in some respects, you can say, well, that took you a few seconds. You used a biro on the back of a napkin. What's the value? What's the worth of that output? Anyone could do that. And her response, as it goes, is quite telling, in that it takes a career of 20 years experience to be able to produce that output within just a few seconds. And so, are we measuring her ability to quickly produce that outcome, or are we measuring the effort and the energy that went into? Do we value the visible effort and energy, or do we value the ability to come up with that answer quite quickly? And that question is going to be asked more and more with automation, because there are shortcuts to creating things which we used to value because of the time it took to create them. Whether that's if you were making making a website, for example, you can code that website infinitely quicker now because of the automation that's available. But the vision and the design is where the value is. Just because you can produce it quicker, the question would be, is it less valuable? And so I like to look at those things, and I think the world's changing in what and how we value. And I think over time, the quicker we get at being able to simply produce things, will create more value in the very human endeavor of creativity and the human interactions that people have. So I think that's, for me, where the value is, and that's how the world is changing.
And that's a really important shift in perspective. And with that shift, there are some misconceptions. So what is one misconception about success that young people should question as they think about the future?
I think the one thing is that success is not measured by being out front all the time, by being the person who's at the forefront. And I've got an amazing example from the world of sport that I like to talk to people about. One of the most celebrated cyclists of all time is a British cyclist called Mark Cavendish, and he won more stages of the most prestigious cycling race, the Tour de France, than anybody in history. He's won more stages of that race than anybody else to have ever done it. But there's an enduring picture that exists that Mark Cavendish chose to share on his own social media, and that's an image which I'll show of Mark Cavendish struggling to cycle up a mountain, being surrounded by his own team who are effectively pulling him up over the mountain. Now, Mark Cavendish can win the race because in the last 100 meters or 200 meters, he's now retired, but he was the fastest person on a bike that could do that. But in order to be able to win in the last 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, he needed a team of 6 or 8 people around him to actually put him in that position first. So on a race that takes 4 hours in the hot sun over a set of mountains, if you measure the success in the first 3 hours, Mark Cavendish will be at the back of the field, relatively, being dragged along by his teammates, because that's not what he's good at, and he relies on that support. But then at the end of the race, he's going to be the one actually winning. But he can only be in that position because of the work that happened before. So I think that's important in terms of measuring that success, is that it's about the people around you as well. And it's about being okay that you might not be the one who's leading at that point, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to reach that finish line first. If he tried to take on the hero status and say, from the first moment of the race, I'm going to be out front and I'm going to lead this whole race to the end, he would fail every time. You can't do that. He can't. It's not physically possible to endure that. So he's got to be cleverer about how he gets to that end point, and acknowledging the people along the way and what he needs, and the support and the interactions with others along the way.
Yeah, definitely. And that's such a key message. Mike, thank you for sharing that, especially for young people. And I think, when we look across different fields, there's so many inspiring stories that we can learn from. So thank you for sharing, guys. So moving on to, across fields such as business, education, sports, or community leadership, what common qualities do you see in people who create meaningful success?
Yeah, I think in terms of leadership, it's those people who don't pretend to have all the answers. I think the very best leaders I've worked with spend a lot of time telling anyone who'll listen that they have no clue. I don't know what I'm doing at the moment. I don't have the answer for you. I know a lot about a little bit, and where that falls directly into my expertise, I can absolutely give you the instant answer from my own experience. But as soon as I start pretending to know the answers to more things outside of my own expertise, that's when leaders fall down. So in my experience, it's those leaders who have the confidence to openly share and admit that they don't have the answer yet, but they have good people surrounding them that do have the answer, and give me a minute and I'll go away and I'll work it out and I'll come back with the suggestion of an answer that will create that success. So for me, they're the most inspiring leaders. Always be careful of people who present that they know all the answers to everything all the time, because they're lying and they don't, because it's not possible. And the most genuine leaders and where I see success being created is the people who have that confidence to say, do you know what, I've surrounded myself with good people, and I've created a culture in which people can grow around me, and that creates that collective success of a team.
Completely agree with you, because I truly believe as well, leadership is not about having all answers, but it's all about asking better questions. Power to say, okay, I don't know, I can come back to this answer, or like pretending to just learn. So that's where everything open up for you and your team to grow. So thank you for sharing. So if a young person feel uncertain about their future, what advice would you offer them as they begin defining their own path?
I think it comes back to defining what impact young people want to have and following your own passions, which sounds a bit cliched because not everybody can do for a career what they love doing. But I think it's finding what the elements are that you enjoy doing and the impact that you enjoy having, and then working out how to create a set of experiences along the way that will allow you then to share those skills, those experiences and expertise eventually with other people. But the danger, I suppose, is looking for the shortcut, the instant success, the ability to instantly win, it depends what you're trying to measure and where the finish line is. But I think sometimes, particularly now in a quite a fast-paced environment that we have, there seems to be a concept of being able to reach an end goal quicker than is probably humanly possible. And I think that creates then a negative impact because it reinforces that perhaps you're not good enough, you're not going fast enough. So I think it's about just relaxing into the fact that actually you're not going to receive instant success. And I heard somebody talk the other day, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about that success along the way is actually of no real benefit to anybody, because actually the learning takes place from all the mistakes you learn along the way. So actually, if success comes too quickly, it's a very shallow platform to build from. And actually choosing, although you wouldn't choose to have the failures along the way, and you don't work to engineer those failures into your career path purposefully, but you can repurpose those experiences that perhaps you perceive in the short term as that didn't go well, that failed, that didn't work, that's not going to make things better. Actually, a collection of that, it's in that environment where you are actually improving. You might not, you might just need to step out of that to be able to see it in the shorter term. Sometimes I think we're too close to our own initial ambitions, but the learning along the way comes from all the things you mess up and get wrong and don't do well at. That's what creates stronger foundations later on.
Yeah, and that's really valuable advice. And I also believe that, sometimes in most cases we have seen the instant success are normally short-lived. Creates lots of frustration if you look at in the long term, because when we're not able to manage up to that standards. So, but thank you. And I think that's really powerful and really valuable to the people who are listening today to this podcast. So across different professions, are there any stories or individuals you have encountered whose journeys redefine what success look like?
So we've probably all heard of Tony Hawk. He's probably the most famous skateboarder to have ever lived. And part of the reason he's so famous and perceived to be so successful is because he was, in effect, the first to do it. And so the story that I like to tell involves Tony Hawk spending his entire career mastering what was seemingly an impossible feat. And that is on a skateboard ramp, being able to spin 2.5 times, so 900-degree turn. So going up one side of the ramp, doing a 900-degree turn, and then successfully coming down the other way. Now, Tony Hawk first achieved this at the age of 31, and he'd been skateboarding since he was able to walk, essentially. So an entire career built up to being able to be the first person in 1999 to do a 900 in a competition was Tony Hawk. He was 31 years old. And the reason for setting the scene of that is that the measure of success there is perhaps not in the fact that he could do the 900. It's the effort and energy and the building of something towards an endpoint that didn't exist already. Because the other half of this story is as intriguing. So in 2024, a young child, a 9-year-old child called Ima Kawakami, became the first person in competition to do 3 900s back to back within a competition. Now he's 9 years old, and it was at Tony Hawk's own competition. And the best part about this, and I'll include the 10-second clip because it's absolutely fascinating. Bearing in mind, Tony Hawk took an entire career, so more than 25 years to learn to do the 900. There's a clip of an interview of him interviewing a 9-year-old Ima, asking him how long it took him to learn the 900 after he'd mastered the 720 degrees trick. And without blinking, his answer, 1 day.
How quickly did you learn a 900 after a 720?
1日
High five.
Wow.
So the question comes is that he's an infinitely better and more successful skateboarder than Tony Hawk? Or is it that Tony Hawk proved that it was possible, and so the next generation of skateboarders knew it was possible and so instantly did it? So how do you measure success? Is it Tony Hawk being the first one to do it and taking 25 years to do it and being the first to do it, and so therein lies the success? Or do we measure the speed of 1 day in which a 9-year-old child also learned the same trick? Is that greater or lesser success? And it's a fascinating kind of conversation to have around the accolades that should be. Does it undermine Tony Hawk's success, the 25 years he took to do it, the fact that a 9-year-old learned how to do it in 1 day? Does that in some way undermine that entire achievement? And the best part about the interview is Tony Hawk's instant and initial reaction is to laugh. He in no way thinks that it undermines his own achievement. He finds it funny and fascinating that a child could say, yeah, I learned that within 1 day. That mental barrier had been broken. It took him 25 years, and he found it hilarious that he comes out with, yeah, 1 day. You could make an argument for either one of those two, Kawakami or Tony Hawk, being better or more successful for different reasons.
Yeah, and those stories really put things into perspective, what we're talking about earlier. And, and often people still feel pressure to follow traditional definition of success. So what helps individuals find the courage to pursue a path that aligns with their values and passion?
I think could it be in the preparation? So does courage and risk come from different places for different people? So one of the other stories that I really like telling and referencing is quite a relevant one, because recently a climber called Alex Hanold climbed one of the tallest buildings in the world. So he climbs with no ropes. And when you hear Alex Hanold talking about his definition of risk to the outside world, him climbing up a mountain or a building with no ropes feels like a risk. It feels like risky business, that any instant you could fall. But he recharacterizes that risk and talks about the immense preparation that happens. So when Alex Hanold climbed a really famous mountain called El Capitan without a rope for the first time, he first climbed that mountain with a rope 10 years before, and he didn't need the rope that time. The rope was there, but he could have he could have done it. But he then trained meticulously for 10 years before then attempting it for the next time. So the level of dedication and preparation that went into removing any possibility of risk through rehearsal and preparation meant that when it comes to actually doing what can be perceived to be a challenging or a risky thing doesn't, because actually for him, he was at far less risk doing that than many of the activities that we would do in our daily lives that we take for granted. It's about that preparation. So it's all in the perception. When a sports person is put under an immense amount of pressure, perhaps to score a winning goal or take a shot, it's not about their ability to score in that moment. It's about the preparation that led up to that, and it's almost a certainty that they won't miss, not because they're lucky or because they're born skilled. That obviously has something to do with it, but it's the preparation that goes into removing that risk and challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that takes lots of courage, the example you've shared, and it's not always easy. So, thank you. And over time, like from your experience working with diverse communities, how do people's definition of success evolve over time, and what can young people learn from that?
Yeah, I think that comes back to, I've been lucky enough to work in different countries around the world with people from many different countries as well. Working in an international environment brings lots of people together who have different lived experiences, different backgrounds, and different perspectives on what success looks like. And I think in all of that, the main message is that people are people, and people do best when they're working for a collective endeavor. So the common theme for me has been, that I've observed, is actually, although the tangible measures of success may be different for different people, the single common thread is around more of a community success, that the part that an individual can play in the success of themselves with others is always more powerful, whether that's being part of a school community, a work community, whether it's more individualized work that brings pleasure or inspiration to other people. I was just talking about Alex Hanold being a climber. The whole point is he climbs on his own, he climbs solo. There's nobody else he's bringing along with him. But when he then talks after the event about the meticulous preparation, he gives permission for people to say, okay, this is how you mitigate risk, this is how you remove risk, this is how you increase your chances of success. So it's that collective endeavor of actually being part of a wider community.
So thank you, Mike. That was really insightful conversation, and the examples you bring from the real world are such a powerful example for anyone hearing it today. So I think the biggest takeaway from this session is the success isn't fixed. It evolves, and it looks different for everyone. So for anyone listening who feels uncertain about their future, this is your reminder that it's okay not to have everything figured out yet. So thank you, Mike, again for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow Lab to Add Leadership on our YouTube channel and share it with someone who might need to hear this. So see you in the next episode. Thank you.